That helps us work faster, it helps us work smarter, and also it helps us become way more self-aware of the tools that we have in our arsenal and how to get the desired results the quickest. If you're anything like me, you probably started this path and journey self-taught with limited access to mentors, internships, formal education in regards to audio engineering, and you had to learn a lot through trial and error and turning to the internet for answers. Like myself, any of us that have turned to the internet for answers, we usually find that there's no real shortage of talk about gear, quick hacks, and plugin settings, but very little about how to develop your taste sensibilities, what might be some of your tonal biases, and really kind of how to develop your ear and sharpen your self-awareness to help raise your mixing and audio engineering game. So I thought it'd be fun to share with you some exercises and some habits that I have up to this day that I use on a regular basis in order to continue to grow my own self-awareness. The first one that we're going to start with has to do with understanding that with any gear, whether analog or plug-in, its main focus for you should be predictability and reliability. If you look at any of your favorite engineers and read any articles about them where they talk about their favorite gear, one thing I bet you're probably going to find is that most say they know exactly what to expect from any piece of gear that they rely on, especially if they call it a desert island piece of gear. So I'm going to show you a quick way that I use to really get to understand the harmonic signature, the EQ curve, and any special sauce that a plugin or even a piece of hardware gear might be putting on my tracks. So that helps me understand that piece of gear better and know whether or not it's worth using at any particular part of my mix processing. Okay, so each piece of gear essentially has an opinion in terms of the way it imparts a tone and a character on a sound source. And we really want to know if that opinion is agreeing with us or arguing with us. The first little kind of test that I like to do, I have 3 tracks that I set up. The first is a dead track that I call placeholder, which loads up any particular plugins that I'm interested in shooting out or learning more about. Right now, it has no real bearing on this video, are channel strips. I've been using this Lindell 80 series. I have the Universal Audio's API Vision Strip and the BX Console's SSL J console set up. Then I have a channel test track, which has a signal generator, a Q3, and a Pro-L. And you could see this baseline track up here mirrors these exactly. The Pro-Ls are doing nothing but allowing me to make sure that I have accurate level. Also on the channel test track, I have a 20 hertz to a 20K sine sweep. And while I'm not going to walk you through all of these in long form, we'll go through both with the Lindell, and then I'll just quickly show you some differences with the API and the J console. The point of this video is to not shoot out these plugins and have a debate about them, but to show you this exercise right here and how you could set this up at home and use it with anything you want and gain a better understanding of how your gear functions in the mix. So we'll bring the Lindell up. Now the only thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this threshold all the way up so that I don't get any compression. Now the signal generator that's here is set to a 1K test tone. It's going to be muted. We won't hear it, but if I engage this, we'll see the channel activates and we see that we got that on the Q3. So we'll keep the Q3 up. We've done this before with our tape series, and we're going to activate the Neve and see what we get. And we get a small second harmonic and a little bit of a larger third harmonic. So if you're not familiar with the harmonics, usually even order harmonics are considered more musically pleasing. Odd harmonics are considered a little bit more aggressive or in your face. We're really not getting much in terms, I mean, we're minus 12 to the signal, which is plus 9. So you know that's a big gap where I would not say this is imparting a lot. The beauty of the Neve is the harder that we drive into it, the harmonic signature. But one thing to note is that, for example, the signal level hitting it is important because we see this input up here. So if I boost my input roughly 5 dB, we see this harmonic signature. If I push this roughly 5 dB, we see a similar harmonic signature. So it's less to do about using this knob and more about the level that's hitting the Neve. The harder you drive into the Neve, we see the more even harmonics and odd order harmonics we bring up. Let's quickly compare that to now the API. And we engage the API, and we see a lot of odd order harmonics. So with the odd order harmonics, we know that that feels a little more aggressive, a little more in your face, which kind of lends itself to API lore. Next, let's bring up the J console, which was, I believe, SSL's cleanest console design, and true to its name. bring up the gain all the way, nothing. So once you kind of complete that test, it might immediately help you inform some choices. Like for example, I know for me that I use my aux buses, which I consider to be family building. So they impart some tonal color to my drums as a group, to my instruments as a group, to my vocals as a group, and then they feed into my vibe bus, which is where I pick up a lot of character in terms of coloring my mix, world building, and global tone shaping. And then that feeds into my finish bus. So I know I get a lot of coloration down the road. So if I'm working on a mix where things already feel like I'm getting a nice balance of harmonic content and punch, I might not want to put something overly aggressive or overly colored on my individual tracks. That could start to overbake or overprocess things. Now, the next way that you can do this is we'll just do it with the J really quick. We'll have it activated. We won't hear it again for the interest of ear protection, but we will open up the Q3, we'll pull the sine sweep up, and we'll sweep all the frequencies, and we can look for abnormalities. And the beauty again of the Q3 is if you want to freeze things, you can, but it'll kind of give you a visual scope of how the plugin that you're shooting out interacts throughout the whole entire frequency range. And true to its name, you can see the API as this sine is sweeping through is really, really clean. So if I'm looking for something where I'm not looking to put a whole lot of harmonic signature on a sound source and just kind of process my tracks to be clean, punchy, and tight, setting up an SSL style console for my multi-tracks might be a winner. And let's bring up the API for comparison. So with the API, we can see more chatter, a lot more chatter going on than we did with the SSL. Which gives us an idea of its harmonic fingerprint. The next test I like to do is convert this over to pink noise. We will activate the Neve, so we're on, and then the first thing I will do to make sure that we're all good is check level. We see that we are really, really close. Is it close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades? I don't know why you'd want hand grenades around horseshoes. Regardless.
Damn it, focus! I'm sorry. Okay, let's just try it again.
We have the channel strip pulled up, and now we'll go up to the bass line. With the bass line, we're going to use the beauty of the Q3, and I'm going to sidechain it so that we can see, and if your eyes are super fast, you could see some of the abnormalities that, or the nonlinear behavior that the Neve channel strip brings when the pink noise is flowing through it compared to the bass line. But the cool thing about this is we can go to EQ match. Now, sometimes EQ match can be super, super awesome, and sometimes it reminds me a little bit of the Sound Radix auto align, where it doesn't always give me consistent results and can do some things that are wacky. But let's kind of have some fun and do this together and do an EQ match to basically see what kind of tonal flavor in terms of frequency curve that the Neve channel strip is bringing to the pink noise. So we're going to sidechain it. It's doing its thing. We'll give it a minute. Once we see this kind of settle in, and we're seeing some classic Neve behavior, right? A little roll off of the subs. Outside of all this wackiness right here, we're seeing a little bit of, high-end roll-off. That's right, where people talk about knees feeling smooth and having, not feeling overly harsh, right? We're getting that nice little kind of dip here. We're getting that tightening of the low mids, and then we're getting a little bit of presence boost. So this is something that's really cool, and you can go and do this for your API or whatever plugins you want and get a sense of whether or not this EQ curve makes sense for global processing, meaning if you're kind of splashing this across all your tracks, or get a sense of understanding that, hey, when I, want to pretend I'm mixing to a Neve console and I put a channel strip on all my multi-tracks, I'm getting a little bit of roll off here, getting a little bit of roll off here, getting a little bit of tightening here, a little bit of presence boost here, and you understand what it brings. And it makes what you're doing just a little bit more focused and a little bit more self-aware. What we're creating here with bass lines is a solid reference point. And we want to think about the kind of duality of where we live as engineers, where art is completely subjective, but references and baselines are objective as, a solid point to kind of compare against. And what that helps us do is understand the gray area that we live in as mix engineers, because we live in between the subjectivity and the objectivity. Doing exercises like this help you really understand where some of your bias might fall, but then also be able to make more informed choices when we are looking to work fast inside of a mix. Okay, training exercise number 2, I use to help define and find my tonal biases. This one I feel really helped me grow and advance as an engineer and really get to the finish line much faster. Now, the way that we do that is going to be kind of simple, but also sound complex. So bear with me. You want to load up in a DAW a bunch of your mixes. Take all the mixes you might be proud of, and even mixes that you think, maybe didn't properly land the plane. And then create a list of professional radio or successful, commercially successful or not, whatever your ear defines. This is the sound I would love to embody, and create a whole reference list and load those up into the DAW. And we're going to hop inside the DAW now. I'm going to show you how to actually create a way to reveal where frequency-wise you might be consistently falling short. We often hear in mixing that we should have, sweeteners on our mix bus or master bus, or people talk about sweetening EQ. And this was one of the biggest pitfalls I fell into, because what gets left out of that conversation when somebody says, hey, yeah, put your smiley face sweetening EQ on of, 100 hertz and 10K. But what if, and I did, which is why it created a lot of problems for me, what if I tend to hear 100 and 10K pretty well in regards to how I like to mix it into my music, and tend to get a natural balance that works well in those two frequency ranges. And then when I pop on my quote unquote sweetening EQ, I'm actually over baking the cake. And rather, I might have other areas that for me required sweetening. And that is what drove me to this particular exercise. So in the interest again of time, we're going to do a brief version. I can't play this song because I don't want to get flagged by YouTube, but I loaded up Misery Business. And the beauty of editing and modern technology, which I encourage you to absolutely lean into, is I just cut the section of the song that I want to reference against a section of the song of one of my mixes. So essentially a chorus to a chorus. And I would go through and have maybe 10 other reference songs and, 10 other of my own mixes, and go through and do this particular exercise, where first, as always, we make sure that we're perfectly level matched, which we are. And then we're going to kind of repeat the trick we did above. We're going to put a Q3 on. We're going to have them flat. And on my mix, I'm going to pop open a Q3. I'm going to side chain to this. And then I am going to do an EQ match.
Out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eyes. Say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted.
So what we have here is actually pretty common, because this was an older mix for me, and these were some things that were revealed through my mixing. And what I would do is I would cut a little bit of the wackiness, and I would get to just a generic shape and say, okay, so this is essentially where my mix fell short. So next I would do is I'd kind of go through them, just hit play on the mix really quick and hear if there's any abnormalities, which typically tend to be somewhere in the mid-range, because different songs, you're going to have different, kind of guitar tones. Vocalists are going to hit in different spots. What I kind of know from this area, the singer for Paramore, this is a general spot where a lot of what she was doing was hitting along with the guitars. So I might have a general balance.
Hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eyes. Say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted.
So essentially what I can say is, okay, with reference 1, it said I'm very light in my subs and I'm very light with my air, and I probably need a little bit of a presence boost. Okay, so then for example, I would have another reference loaded up. Won't play this one either so that we don't get flagged. And I will boot up another Q3 with the other one in bypass, and I will side chain it to the new song, set up for an EQ match. So we can already see, without me even having to hit analyze, that I've already had 2 in a row now that are telling me that I might be light in the subs and light in the air. Let's open this up really fast, and we can basically see that if I started to just kind of get out some of the freakiness here, we have something very similar, right? 2 totally different songs in terms of Misery Business and Teen Spirit, but revealing some, consistencies in where I might be light. So this is something that I feel is really, really critical for you to do if you are trying to really get a sense of why don't I sound sound like a radio record, and be able to find where you might need to develop your own sweetening EQ curve to help you get there. Also, what this exercise really reveals with our tonal biases is if you are the recording engineer, whether it's your own music or you're recording other people and you're also mixing, you might have to think about different instrument choices, different microphone choices, different things you can do at the source to make sure you're capturing more robust low end or more air in your mixes. This is revealing tonal biases. It's great because now you are able to customize your own sweetening curve, which is something that does become very complementary to the way that you work and will help enhance your mixes and get you to that kind of radio ready or radio polish or whatever adjectives you want to insert that makes it sound like a record finish line that most of us are chasing. And for our final training exercise today, it's a way to kind of sharpen your ear and also help you to start listening for the result of your moves and not the process. And we're going to do that by using an EQ in an interesting way, where we're going to EQ in bypass, which is almost the equivalent of mixing with your eyes closed. Now, if you use virtual instruments and then have access to some of your own raw recordings, you can load up any virtual instrument that mimics a raw recording. So whether a virtual piano, virtual bass lines, whatever it might be, most of those that come, pre-mixed. So it's already got a good mix on it. It's out of the box, supposed to just kind of drop into your production and sound like a record. And I like to take one of those and compare it against a raw recording that I might have on file. So here I have a kick sample and I have a raw recorded bass drum. So let's hear the raw recorded bass drum really quick. Cool. Sounds like a raw recorded bass drum and a sample. Now, they are miles apart in terms of, we'll say, their production polish. Now, an exercise that I like to do, you can pull up any EQ that you like. Since I've been really working with channel strips and trying to get the flavor of different channel strips right now, I'm going to just pull up the Lindell 80 and put the plugin in bypass. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play the raw kick channel and I'm going to engage the EQ. And I'm going to listen and see if it gave me what it was I was looking for. Now, there's no way I'm going to be able to match the kick sample exactly. That could be a fool's errand because it's a different drum in a different space, different processing, all that stuff. But where this does come in handy is, say, for example, you're mixing with clients over your shoulder and they're saying, I want my kick drum to have more snap, or I want it to sound like this reference. And you're hearing the reference to a dense mix. You're saying, oh, I need more beater attack and I need a little bit more weight. But do we know exactly where we want to reach? For example, what this can reveal when you train long enough is you might think or reach for 3.2K when you should be reaching for 7K. You might think that that snap is in 7K, so you go and bypass, hit 7K and boost, and then you come back and you say, whoa, that's not at all what I thought it was going to be. The other thing it helps you sharpen is, and get over, might be the fear of the boost. When you're using a Q3 or something, or you really are sitting there in a mix and you're kind of inching up the knob, a lot of you probably have felt the same, where you start getting nervous, like, wow, should I be boosting this much? Should I be boosting this much? Should I be diming an EQ due to pros dime EQs like that? So it helps you get past that fear when you kind of, initially my suspicion would be when you first start, you'll probably start with little mini moves and realize you're not moving the needle enough. So when you're using the bypass and doing this with the bypass engaged, what you're not hearing is the gradual rise or fall of your moves, but rather you're anticipating what you want, you're engaging, and you're hearing the immediate impact of what your decision was. And this is something that'll help you work faster. It'll help you recognize what frequencies you might be underestimating, overestimating, and also the power of the actual boost or cut in terms of how many decibels you're doing it. So I found that this exercise is great. I love doing it. I still do it all the time with different plugins. Helps me understand, exactly like how aggressive I can be with them, what frequencies in there I like, and get desired results. Let's do it again, this time with the snare drum. And I'm going to show you how I like to also incorporate some modern tools and technology into what we're doing and understanding, say, for example, the limited aspect of working with maybe an analog EQ and how you could supplement with like, fully parametric graphic and digital EQ like a Q3 is. So we'll pull up the Lindell 80 again. We'll put it on in bypass. We'll take the compressor out. And first, let's listen to the sample. Okay, so a lot of shell explosion, which is really cool, but it definitely needs more stick articulation. Now let's create a scenario, a training scenario, where the drummer of a band shows us this snare sample and says, I want my snare drum to sound like this sample. So what we're noticing is there's a lot of overtones in our snare drum that we don't like. But let's go to here, let's do our exercise. So I'm thinking we're gonna want a little bit of air. We're definitely gonna want some stick crack. There was a little bit of body there that we're lacking, but it was completely outshined by all the resonance. So we're also going to clear up a little bit and roll off just a little bit of top. So here we go. So now that we have the snap, if we compare it to the other one, so I was a little light, as you could see. So that's where I'm like, okay, so now I'll remember that I could probably even be more aggressive when I have a dull snare drum. So I kind of slid that up. But now I'm going to move and I'm going to bring a Q3 in. The reason I sometimes tend to, when I am working with a channel strip or doing any kind of multi-track processing, I'll tend to put my channel strip on the second channel because I then will bring in a Q3. Now I feel that you should be able to mix a song using just a digital EQ like a Q3 and a channel strip in regards to my multi-tracks and feed that all the way down the line to my aux buses and my vibe bus and finish bus. So where the digital EQ now comes in handy, it allows us a surgical precision to be able to go in now and clean up some of that area that the drummer was asking to have removed in our little fake example, which is going to be some of those overtones right around the shell pop. So let's kind of get that going. Now you might be wondering, hey, like I understand how the Q3 and the channel strip can work together in, a real mix setting, like you just said, feeling like you should be able to mix everything, EJ, with a channel strip and, a parametric digital EQ. But how does that work and help us with training? Well, what it ends up doing is this exercise here, where I am trying to mimic or get in the ballpark of a sound, it helps me understand what I can get in regards from the channel strip, which is definitely very broad strokes and helps me kind of get some coloration into the sound. But then where the digital aspect helps me really kind of refine. And essentially I was able to take all those drum overtones and almost turn them into faders, where now I can go up and down and kind of dial that into, a respectable level. But we could hear how without this, we have a lot of the shell overtone. And now we have a much tighter sounding drum, which is reminiscent of the sample. Where with the sample, we don't hear a ton of that kind of overtone area in the shells. We'll do it before. So I hope you found this video useful. Again, having a system where you can, almost like a scientist, understand what your plugin or processing is doing to your sound source in terms of its harmonic fingerprint and its kind of imparted equalizing curve or sweetening curve to a sound source will help you make more informed choices. And then from there, you can move into revealing what might be your tonal or mixing biases by taking your mixes and referencing them against, tracks that really grab your ear in a very pleasing and, listenable way, and understanding where your shortcomings might be, and then designing whether it be a custom EQ that might help, sweeten your mixes in the proper way, or, allow you to make changes in your work workflow to compensate for those deficiencies. And then the last is taking individual tracks and practicing working with tools to get those to what would be considered a very polished level, and understanding the capabilities of those tools, like we did in this example where we saw we could use a channel strip to really give a lot of color and punch and some general tone sculpting to a snare drum, but needed the digital EQ to come in and really do some of the carving. That helps us work faster, it helps us work smarter, and also it helps us become way more self-aware of the tools that we have in our arsenal and how to get the desired results the quickest. So again, not a super fun or flashy video, but I do hope you find it useful, and please let me know in the comments below if you have any training exercises that you like to do to sharpen up your mixing skills, or if you've tried these and what you found the results to be. Okay, my friends, take care.